The Confederacy has a very legitimate argument that we shouldn't be using mind changers because mind changers have been detrimental to our people.
We're talking about what was considered a drug. It was a controlled substance, and now it's legal.
I think the time is now just to stop treating it like it's some kind of a destructive drug when it's not. It's very far from that.
We've had the experience with the tobacco industry has been one of the biggest topics, really. There's got to be safeguards. This time around, we're not allowing some outside criminal element to come into our community or some outside element to benefit more than we would.
The Mohawk word used for cannabis is Kahnawake, which loosely translates to bad tobacco. And as many of our Mohawk communities look at how or if they will capitalize on Canada's decision to legalize marijuana, there have been ongoing debates at the grassroots level on whether or not cannabis has any cultural significance. Taking that discussion one step further are many of the cannabis retailers from within these Mohawk communities who continue to challenge federal and provincial laws, saying it's the inherent right of the Iroquois people to make medicine and to establish their own economy. Philosophy that is derived from the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, a traditional form of government. That position is in stark contrast to that of other traditional Mohawk leaders who oppose cannabis altogether, like the Mohawk Nation branch in Kahnawake, who released a statement recently saying cannabis is not a traditional medicine.
The cannabis that has THC in it, the one that gives you a high, it's not a traditional medicine. It wasn't here before. It came later. And so this whole idea that we've always used it is not true. There's nothing in our really traditions that indicate that we did. We can't support the recreational use of cannabis. We can support that as a medicine for medicinal purposes, those that need it. But we think we maintain the position that cannabis with THC in it is a mind changer, just like alcohol, and that it's not really good for our people to be using that kind of cannabis.
Kenneth Deere, the secretary for the Mohawk Nation branch at Kahnawake, says that type of cannabis was introduced by the settlers and is detrimental to the people.
The Longhouse has this position that we shouldn't be using things that can change our mind, that are mind changers. Drugs, alcohol is one of them. Look at the damage alcohol has done to our society. Nobody can say that, well, alcohol is harmless. It's not. It has tremendously destructive to our people and impoverished our people at one time. And it was used to steal. Non-natives used alcohol, to manipulate our people. So we have to remember that, the use of alcohol. And so the Confederacy has a very legitimate argument that we shouldn't be using mind changers because mind changers have been detrimental to our people.
Deere says despite discussions at the community level that cannabis could bring an economic benefit to the community, the Longhouse says it's still against commercialization.
So we make it known, though, that in certain important issues like cannabis, that this is our position, is that we're against the recreational use of cannabis that has THC in it, and we're also, because we're against that, then we also have to be against the production of that, because it would be hypocritical to say don't use cannabis, but we're going to grow it and we'll sell it. We have to be consistent and clear with that position.
But there are others who see growing and selling it as an exercise of their inherent rights. Clifton Nicholas, a self-described sovereign entrepreneur from the Kanesatake Mohawk territory, operates Smoke Signals, which is located in the heart of his Mohawk community. The Smoke Signals dispensary is part of a larger franchise that was developed by Tyendinaga businessman Jamie Kunkel, who also shares a similar philosophy that one can operate a business on Mohawk territory because it's part of their inherent rights.
I think as a Ungwahuma person, as someone who's sovereign, I have a right to an economy. And if I follow Canada's guidelines, I'll never get anywhere. I'll still be a poor Indian on the res. So doesn't suit me. It never suits me. I will not do that. I struggle. I work hard at what I'm doing, and I think that I have a right to do this. I'm not harming anybody. As long as I don't do any harm, I don't see any problem with it. It's the same thing like, oh, it's illegal. You're selling cigarettes. They're not taxed. It's the same difference now. It's the same thing. You know, I feel that we have a right to do this. I feel that we have a right to exploit this for our benefit, both economically and physically and spiritually if we need to.
Nicholas says although he knows he's no physician or pharmacist, he does take the time to get to know his clients and their needs.
They come to me asking, I'm obligated at that point to do that. I do vet people. I do make sure that they're getting the right things. I just don't sell to anybody. I had one elderly lady come in who wanted cannabis, but I asked her, said, how's your heart? Are you on any heart medication? Says, yes, I get palpitations. Then you better go see these other people who have doctors and professionals to check you out to make sure that you're not having any negative interactions. I've had a couple of people with mental health issues who, if they use cannabis, can have a psychotic episode. I refuse service. I do this often.
Smoke Signals is the first marijuana dispensary in Kanesatake, and Nicholas says cannabis is a medicine and people need to start treating it like one.
I think the time is now just to stop treating it like it's some kind of a destructive drug when it's not. It's very far from that. And I'm working hard with this store and with me speaking, out about, trying to dispel the stigma, particularly amongst our people. I think we're really, given our histories and everything, I think we're very sensitive to this subject right now. And I think we rightfully should be, but I don't think we should dwell in ignorance.
Nicholas is one of the very few community members carving their own space in the local Kanesatake retail market. The sale of cannabis in the community isn't legal yet. Serge O.D. Simon, Grand Chief of the Mohawk Council of Kanesatake, says when it comes to developing legislation, everything is still up in the air. Simon says that due to lack of resources, the opportunity could altogether disappear, like smoke on the water.
We've been looking at it for well over, a year and a half on what we were going to do when this gets legalized, but it always came back to a lack of resources to try to hire the right professionals to guide us and help us put this together.
The Grand Chief says that creating legislation in his community is tricky and that the MCK only wants to ensure it reflects the diverse perspectives on cannabis.
We're talking about what was considered a drug. It was a controlled substance, and now it's legal. We look at the statistics related to First Nations and suicide, drug addiction, incarceration, and early death. These are all things that weigh on your mind on how are you going to sew this into your social fabric now.
Simon did, however, reveal that his council was looking at the economic development side of medical cannabis, which he says was more accepted by community members.
For the council not to be pushed aside, we decided we're going to go into this and maybe start a nice pilot project where all the green technologies that exist today were going to be used on this project. Solar, wind, hydrogen, the new hydrogen light technologies and water recuperation technologies, and form this entire pilot project, bringing in various partnerships.
But the council hasn't been able to solidify any deals just yet, and they're not keen on allowing any other ventures to pop up in their community.
I know some of the criticism that we've received about this, that, council, they'll agree on that one, but they won't let us do it. We won't let you do it because you come here and you ask us to approve something without knowing who the partners are. And in some cases, is organized crime in there? Maybe.
And you're talking about people in the community that
Yes.
want to have private.
Yes, exactly.
Meantime, in Kahnawake, the Mohawk Council is looking at its own opportunities and partnerships within the cannabis industry. But first, they are developing legislation. Mohawk Council Chief Gina Deere says for over a year they have been doing just that, not wanting to see a retail industry replicating that of tobacco, unregulated.
We have, taken a look at what cannabis means to Kahnawake rather than looking at what it means in general for the population.
Deere says they have learned their lesson from the tobacco trade, and this time they have the benefit for the collective in mind. She says concerns ranged from zoning of factories and stores to employees' rights and benefits and product quality. All that was taken into consideration when developing their own regulation.
You know, we've learned through the business part of it, there is a real science to it. And it's really important that all of those safeguards are in place and that quality assurance takes place.
So this time around, the Mohawk Council says it wanted to do its due diligence. So in September of 2017, the Mohawk Council imposed a moratorium on the production, distribution, and sale of cannabis in Kahnawake.
We had a business meeting with community members that were interested in getting in the industry, and they floated several ideas of how they would like to see an industry in Kahnawake. Some of the ideas were quite concerning. The looseness of the industry is what was concerning to us. First of all, this product has got a recreational use and a medicinal use, right? And it's very important for somebody who's using it as a medicine to get something that has, you know, quality assurance.
It seems the topic of quality assurance was on everyone's mind as the date to legalize marijuana in Canada grew closer. And as the Mohawk Council was in the final stages of developing legislation, they faced heavy criticism from local entrepreneurs about the process they were using to develop regulation.
Why are the people not being allowed to participate?
We can come together in one room, develop this law together. We don't have to have this at odds. This is you guys that are doing this. You're putting this on us. We don't want to. We want to work together.
But Deere says the steps that the Mohawk Council took were justified.
Having the law really is our first step, right? And then the regulations will come after, and there's a board that will be functioning to make those decisions on regulations, and it's not going to be the Mohawk Council who does that.
In the Mohawk community of Akwesasne, which straddles the U.S.-Canadian border, a company known as Seven Leaf became the first Indigenous-owned medical cannabis facility in Canada licensed by the federal government. Mohawk Council of Akwesasne Chief Eddie Roundpoint says Seven Leaf is the perfect example of how MCA can create an industry that will be of economic benefit to both the private and public sectors.
They've achieved a great success. It was an arduous process for them. It took many years because they had to follow the guidelines under Health Canada. They did basically all the legwork on their own independently, but at the same time keeping Mohawk Council updated and apprised of their progress as things moved along.
We'll be able to package anywhere from 500 to 1,000 grams in one.
Council thinks it should look like a balance between the public sector and as well as the private sector. In describing each one, you look at the public sector as the oversight, the development of the law, the licensing, the enforcement, and then when you look at the private sector, it's the economic factor, being the retail industry.
Roundpoint says prior to October 17th, when marijuana became legal in Canada, the MCA passed interim legislation for their community.
That was our first step, and is to get something in place prior to demonstrate that we had begun establishing the framework for the future cannabis law, which is under development.
Regulations were developed around several important areas.
And a lot of it evolves around protecting the public safety, protecting the youth, as well as the health and education component. In relation to the youth, it was done by, one of the areas we focused on was restricting their access to cannabis. So that's kind of those are the three main components that we're looking at in developing our law.
It seems a common sentiment that is shared throughout these Mohawk territories is the opportunity to create more economic development initiatives and support for their communities. No doubt the issue and the industry in Indian country is evolving. Reporting for Akwesasne TV, I'm Regan Jacobs.